You're listening to Forward Faster, bite-sized insights for entrepreneurs.
Hello and welcome to Forward Faster. I am Sujatha Ramanujan. I am the Managing Director of Luminate, the optics program within NextCorps. And I'm also a board member of the Optical Society. And I'm here today with Claudio Mazzali. He is a Senior VP at Corning Optical Communications, an OSA Fellow, and co-chair of FiO+LS this year. So welcome to our program, and we're excited to have you here.
Thank you. Happy to be here, Sujatha.
So tell me a little bit about FiO+LS and what are the big focus for FiO+LS this year? Tell us about the conference.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's a unique year. I think 2020 is a unique year for many things, and it's going to be a unique year for FiO+LS as well. FiO+LS is it's of course one of the most important conferences that we have at the Optical Society. And this year we are following a few others and trying to manage that with the COVID challenges. It's going to be a fully virtual conference this year, and we're taking that with a positive spin. I think there are a few things that we can even take advantage of our challenges and making sure that more people can attend. The cost for attendees will be lower because it's going to be fully virtual. So it's pretty much free for attendees. The authors have to pay a small fee, but that would allow an audience to be even bigger. And there are so many things happening in optics these days that we're pretty excited about the program. We have fantastic plenary speakers. We have Federico Capasso from Harvard. He's going to be talking about meta surfaces and some really disruptive technologies in that area. Nergis Mavalvola from MIT, also with some amazing work on detection of gravitational waves using optics. So lots of different things. The conference this year not only is co-located or co-happening since it's virtually with LS, but also with Quantum 2.0. So the Quantum 2.0 conference will be happening at the same time, and we are taking advantage of that. So there is a lot of emphasis on quantum as well. And regarding teams, we're going to cover the typical topics of frontier and optics that we do every year. We're going to have a little bit more specific theme around AR, VR. And as I said, we have some visionary speakers that will talk about some other areas, quantum optics, ultra-fast spectroscopy, and some other areas. So we're pretty excited about it.
So this is the first time it's been online. So how many people do you think will come? And it's always been an international conference. So do you expect it to be bigger or the same size? So what are your thoughts around?
As soon as we communicated that this would be a fully virtual conference, then we got a peak in the number of paper submissions. I think everybody was just waiting to see if they would be able to participate and come to DC. Or now that's virtual, we actually get a very large number of submissions. So the number of papers is pretty higher than in prior year, which is great. So people are willing to share their work and to, of course, interact with the community, even in this new format. I think the audience is going to be probably larger, and the reason is because, well, you don't need to travel and you can attend from whatever you are. There are some limitations, of course, when you think about time zones. Our colleagues from Asia may have more of a hard time to attend during the entire day, perhaps. But I believe that we're going to have more people attending. It also being virtual, it brings some other flexibilities, right? For instance, I think we're going to have more oral talks. Frontier in Optics is very famous for the poster presentations. Of course, we have a format where it's a kind of a poster presentation online, but we also have more time for oral talks. So people that were on the edge, they may be invited to give a oral talk. So that may also be pretty good. So again, I don't want to say that we know how to do this. We are learning. I think Optical Society actually did a fantastic job at OFC. OFC happened when things were starting to close in March, and they had to do a kind of a hybrid overnight between face-to-face and virtual. And I think it worked well. Clio was already virtual, and I think we got some good feedback, but every conference, the Optical Society is learning. And I think by the time of Frontier in Optics in September, I think this will be a very good conference.
Great. So COVID is really changing how associations serve their members. I see that we have this virtual conference, which personally, as a student, I would have found it really exciting because I remember when we were, or an early professional, when you couldn't go to very many conferences because you're financially limited and they'd only send one or two people. So this is, I think, very exciting for people who otherwise would not have had a chance to go. So I see that as kind of a good thing that the society is doing. But can you comment on some of how the association is changing in general to serve its members? What have been some of the difficult things you've seen, and what do you think are some of the potential opportunities that OSA could take advantage of?
Yeah, so you mentioned one, right? I think we all have that experience that when you're a student, you have to fight for that grant, even if mainly when you're from a different country. I did my undergrad in Brazil, and I remember that you finish work and you want to present your paper. And after you did all that, you have to apply for a grant to see if you can, get your air ticket to come to US or another place to present your paper. So I think this would allow more students, and we know the Optical Society is in a continuous effort to be as global as possible, and making sure that we have participation from students and scientists and industry and of course companies from all countries, and increase that diversity of inputs that we get. So I think this would allow us to do more. However, I want to be realistic, right? I think that in the academic world, or let's say in the scientific world, not only academia but also industrial labs, it is super important to have the personal interaction. So I want to make sure that we don't get into the hype of the world will be all online moving forward. No, it won't. I think that it's going to be much more online than we are used to, and I think that's a good thing. But I do think that the direct connection is super important, and that will continue. So what may happen, I believe, is that we're going to have a lot of the information sharing, the content sharing being more online, and you may end up having specific face-to-face interaction opportunities where really you're going to focus on that. You're going to focus on workshops where you have a group of people sitting in a room and discussing a new area, a new technology, not the broadcast from the speaker to the audience. That can be more online, but that workshop spirit, right, where you have people working on the same area that are sitting together and discussing that's still important. Can be done online, yes, it can, but I think that the personal face-to-face is super important. Will continue, I think.
So I'm going to take a little sideways step here. So that's virtual and what COVID has brought us. But let's talk about optics now. What are the trends you see occurring in optics? What are some things that you see happening that are really exciting?
Yeah, so, I mentioned one of our plenary speakers, Dr. Federico Capasso from Harvard. He's going to be talking about metasurfaces in flat optics. That's, to me, an area that it's ready to provide some breakthroughs in real applications. What's exciting to me about this technology is that there is fundamental understanding of optics going on in that area, but is extremely close to real applications. So I come from the industrial world, right? So I work for a company we have the company that I work for, Corning, invest a lot in R&D, so huge investment in labs, and of course the connection between a new area in science with real applications in real life and products or technology that people be using. If that connection is shorter, right, that becomes more exciting, right? It's more like, okay, we can learn here and we can transform that in something that's useful for people very quickly. Metasurfaces to me is an area that has that aspect. I see components being developed as we speak into that area that will be big disruptions in the area that I spend most of my time, which is optical communications. When you think about integrated optics, co-packaged optics, silicon photonics, all those areas, I think we're gonna enable a few things that were very difficult until now, and I think the area of metasurface is one that has huge potential. The other one Of course, there is AR, VR that people are excited about. But then if I go to the other extreme, which is something that is super cool, super interesting from the fundamentals of optics and physics in general, but not as close to products yet, it would be the quantum optics, which is another area that we're trying to emphasize with FiOs and Quantum 2.0. That specifically to me has, again, a huge potential for breakthroughs, including the area that I work with. When you think about quantum cryptography, quantum communication, and then you go to quantum computers, there are different schools of thought on that area, but I am a believer that optics is going to play a very critical role to enable that. And to me, what's interesting about quantum optics is that it's not only a specific new area of optics or anything like that. It's an application of optics that would require many different sub areas of optics. Transceivers, devices. There are many different things in optics that will be required to be developed at a different level to enable this kind of subsystem of a quantum optics system, either for communications or cryptography or quantum computers. I'm happy to see that governments and countries are putting more and more emphasis and providing more funding for that area in general. I think we're going to get the critical mass that is necessary. So I'm excited about that too. And of course, there are so many other areas. We work in optics, so we are usually optic fanatics, but I'm giving you two that I think are unique.
So where do you see things in 10 years? It's been such a strange year, scientifically as well as in so many ways, that I think it's caused a lot of us to take a step back and really imagine what things will look like.
Yeah. I keep thinking about that, Sujatha, because, again, working for an industrial lab, it's super. Even when you do road mapping, right, you need to kind of predict the future, or you need to do some future shaping if you can. But we keep thinking about that. The world is very broad, right? So if I narrow down to the areas that I feel I'm allowed to talk a little bit. One area that, if you look at the last several years and what's happening more recently, I think the efficiency of us as a society is growing very quickly. We are getting things done in a much more effective way. And when you think about that and what's happening now, there is a group of things or a set of things that are happening at the same time that I think will create a bump on that efficiency that probably is going to be something that we never saw before. And let me explain a little bit more what I'm talking about. When you combine the availability of communications that we have today, and again, that's my area, right? Optical communications. When you combine how much bandwidth people have today, or will have even more in their houses, in their offices pretty soon, and you combine their optical communications, 5G, which is connected to optical communications. So if you start looking at that ability to get information, then you add the fact that those networks now, they are all symmetrical, they are bidirectional. So it's not just you get information from a centralized broadcasting source. It's actually you provide information, right? The upstream content now is coming from everybody. Kids with their videos, they are learning how to use that network. But imagine in the future when those kids are 10 years older. So the network now allows the entire world to provide that information back and forth. That's one. Now, this is happening at the same time that things that like machine learning and augmented reality and artificial intelligence are getting to a point where they are really useful. They're not just a topic of science. They are useful. If you look into the hyperscale data centers, right, the Googles, Facebooks, etc., Microsoft, they are supercomputers, right? Their data centers are really supercomputers. They are huge artificial intelligence machines that are running algorithms that are transforming this amount of information that the entire world is creating and uploading to the network in useful things. We always going to go through a phase where they are not so useful, or they are used just for market applications or to give you the right advertisement. Sure, there is that piece. But if you just think about the potential of that, right? You have all this information coming from everybody, getting to those humongous super machines with very capable artificial intelligence, machine learning. I think this will create such a transformational way into healthcare. How can we discover solutions or cures for new diseases? How can we help with populations that are in trouble or poverty? How can we bring the value to those communities that don't have access to things that we do, that we all have access to? So I think it's going to be a bump in efficiency that I'm hopeful that the humankind will actually use that in a good direction and to distribute that goodwill and help everybody. So that's what I hope. Maybe I'm too rosy on the future here, but that's how I like to think, at least.
Well, I like a rosy future as well, so I don't blame you. There's no point in catastrophizing.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you one last question, but before I go there, is there something you want to just share with our audience, something like, hey, this is on my mind and I'd like to let you know about it? Or
no, I think connected to your last question, right? I do think that sometimes in the world, we are in the United States now, in this country, there are so many things going on. Some of them that are making us rethink the way that we live our lives, the way that we treat people, different people. And I think we should all think that we can all help. And this kind of positive view of the future is because I believe on that. I believe that if we all realize that we have our mission here and we can help each other and we can treat people like they they have to be treated, and we realize we're not in denial about the differences in the world, that some people may need more help, and the folks that have the capabilities, they should be helping that to spread that that richness that we have in this planet, right? I think we may be going through a phase now where we are realizing that, and I hope not only for where we are today, but for the future, things will be much better. So anyway, it's back to your last question. I'm a naturally optimistic person.
So tell me something. And this is that standard question that interviewers ask. What are you reading lately? What's on your bookshelf?
Yeah, right. I need to have an answer ready for that. Well, I have to tell you that I'm not a very disciplined reader from the following perspective. I don't read like one book then another. I have this problem that sometimes I start 2 or 3 books at the same time and reading them in parallel, and then I keep jumping from one to the other, and sometimes it works pretty well because I start making connections between them. Sometimes create a big mess in my in my brain, but that's what I do. And I just recently I finished a book that was about Boltzmann and talk about his equation, but that's what I finished. Right now, I'm in between 2 books. One is a rereading. The book is called The Beat and the Pendulum. It's from Tom Siegfried. It's a very interesting book about the physics of information. So it basically goes into the fundamentals of how a bit is, how much energy you need to create a bit of information, how much energy you need to delete a bit of information. And Tom, the author, Tom Siegfried, he's actually not a scientist, he's a journalist, and he interviewed many people's academia, industry, etc. And he wrote in a beautiful way how the physics and the energy behind information, which we usually don't make that connection between a real entity, a real physical entity, and information. But I have a pet passion for that topic. So The Beat and the Pendulum, Tom Siegfried, that was a good one. It's an old book, and I'm rereading it. And the other one, I learned about this book in one of those interviews when somebody asked somebody what you're reading. And it was Life 3.0. Life 3.0 is a book about, it's from Max Tegmark, it's from MIT. And it's about artificial intelligence, but it's a different approach. It's basically explaining a few fundamental concepts of artificial intelligence and the impact of that on society. So, I'm in this, right now I'm in my phase of information and AI and this learning.
Excellent. So I'd like to take a moment here to thank you for joining us. This is a fun thing that we like to do. So to everybody, this is Claudio Mazzali, and we thank him for joining us today on Forward Faster. If to our audience, I'd like to tell you if you can find other podcasts on nextcorps.org/podcasts. We interview some exciting people in our field and others, startups. So it's an exciting collection of podcasts. And I urge you to go look at it, listen to it. So listen to our podcast, drop us a line, offer us a comment. Always happy to have input from our audience. So Claudio, thank you again for joining us. We appreciate you coming.